Usually when you decide you want to pick up a new language, you expect to be handed a map that looks at least somewhat familiar.
Right, yeah. Like there's a baseline.
Exactly. You think, okay, well, I know what a noun is, I know what a verb is, I just need to swap out my English words for these new foreign words.
Hmm.
It's a lot like moving into a new house where the furniture is essentially the same. It's just, been rearranged into different rooms.
It's a comforting assumption to make. I mean, you expect a kitchen to still function entirely like a kitchen, even if the cabinets are painted a different color or the sink is on the opposite wall.
Hmm.
Most language learners really rely heavily on those shared structural concepts to just, find their footing.
But then you decide to look at Finnish.
Yeah,
And suddenly you realize you're not looking at a slightly different house. You are holding the blueprints for a highly advanced self-assembling spaceship.
that is a great way to put it.
The walls are the engine, the furniture is built into the floor, and your trusty English language map is just completely upside down. It fundamentally challenges everything you take for granted about how a sentence is put together.
It really does, because Finnish doesn't play by the rules we're used to in the English-speaking world.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at Finland's geographic neighbors, right, Sweden, Norway, those are North Germanic languages. They share a massive Indo-European ancestral family tree with English.
Right, so there's that shared DNA.
Exactly. It's like going to a linguistic family reunion. You can spot the structural resemblances, the shared roots. But Finnish sits on a completely different evolutionary branch. It belongs to the Uralic language family, which means it developed its own, completely unique solutions to the basic problem of human communication.
Okay, let's unpack this, because setting the stage here is crucial. We're using this deep dive as a custom-built learning guide just for you, the listener, to actually understand the mechanics of this spaceship. And the first major mechanical difference is that Finnish is what linguists call a highly agglutinative language.
Right, which is admittedly a heavy piece of linguistic jargon. But the concept itself is incredibly elegant. Agglutination comes from the Latin word for gluing.
Gluing, okay.
So instead of relying on lots of tiny, separate, standalone words to convey a complex meaning, like we do in English with our endless supply of prepositions, words like in, on, to, or with,
Right.
Finnish prefers to stack suffixes onto the end of root words. It literally glues pieces of meaning together to create these dense, highly efficient single words.
So instead of having a scattershot of little words floating around a sentence, the core word just gets longer and heavier, absorbing the context into itself.
That's exactly it.
Which brings us to the first step in our guide. We have to figure out who is actually flying this spaceship. Before we can build complex sentences, we need to know who the actors are. And right away, looking at personal pronouns reveals a fundamental difference in how Finnish categorizes the world.
Let's start with the standard foundations. In English, we hypercategorize our third-person pronouns. We have he, she, and they. But in standard Finnish, the core personal pronouns are mine for I, sinä for you, and hän for the third person.
And that hän pronoun is entirely gender neutral, right?
Completely. It means he, she, or they, depending entirely on who you are talking about. Finnish possesses absolutely zero grammatical gender.
I love that. It just streamlines things so much. You don't have to worry about memorizing if a table is masculine or a chair is feminine, or even specifying the gender of the person you're talking about, unless it's genuinely relevant to the story.
It is very efficient.
But how do you actually use these pronouns in a sentence?
Well, this is where that gluing concept starts to really show its power. The plot thickens significantly when you look at how these pronouns interact with verbs. Finnish verbs are heavily conjugated, meaning their endings morph based on the person and the number of people doing the action.
Okay.
So the verb itself actually swallows the pronoun's information. Give me a concrete example of that. Let's say I want to say, I am.
Okay, so the base verb for to be is olla. But if you want to say I am, the form becomes ollen. That single N attached to the very end of ollen acts as a beacon. It explicitly tells anyone listening that the first person singular, I, is the one performing the action.
So the N is doing the exact same job as the word mine,
Exactly.
which means, wait, do I even need to say mean?
You don't. In standard written Finnish, you can drop the words for I and you completely. Saying mine, ollen is redundant, unless you are specifically trying to emphasize that I am the one doing something as opposed to someone else. Ordinarily, you just say ollen. The verb does all the heavy lifting for you.
It's like wearing a name tag that is so bright and obvious you don't even need to introduce yourself when you walk into a room. The verb ending is your name tag.
That's a perfect analogy.
But wait, what about that third person? Can I drop the him?
Ah, that is the exception. In standard formal language, the third person pronoun hän is mandatory.
Really? Why is that? The reasoning is that first and second person, I and you, are directly involved in the conversation. The context is obvious. But a third party could be anyone in the world, so the grammar requires you to specify that a separate human entity is taking the action.
Okay, well, that makes perfect logical sense for a textbook, but earlier you hinted that the rules change the second you step off the written page. What happens to these pronouns when you're actually just having a normal conversation in Helsinki?
Oh, the entire system shifts toward ruthless spoken efficiency. In colloquial spoken Finnish, people rarely use that beautiful gender-neutral han to refer to other people.
What do they use instead?
They swap it out for the words si or ne.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Si and ne are the inanimate pronouns, right? Like the equivalent of it, and those for objects.
That's correct.
So if I'm at a bar telling a story about my friend who just walked in, calling them he or she using han is too formal, and I should literally refer to my human friend as it.
I know, it sounds incredibly abrasive to an English speaker.
It sounds totally dehumanizing.
Which is completely understandable given our linguistic background. We guard our personal pronouns fiercely because they represent our identity. But to a native Finnish speaker, swapping han for se doesn't carry that dehumanizing weight whatsoever.
Really? Not at all.
None. The strict distinction between han for humans and se for objects has just never occurred completely naturally in the casual spoken language. Calling your friend se isn't an insult, it's just a testament to the fast, informal efficiency of street-level speech.
So seon, literally it is the completely standard, casual way to say he is or she is.
Yes.
The spoken culture just treats the person as an entity in the narrative, says, yeah, it works fine, let's keep the story moving, and saves the formal hand for writing or extreme politeness.
Precisely. Although, drawing a boundary line here, animals, being considered less animate than humans in this linguistic hierarchy, are never referred to as han. They're always se, whether you're writing a formal essay or chatting at a pub.
Fascinating. Okay, so we know who is taking the action, and we know our verbs are wearing the name tags. But verbs only describe the action itself. If we want to navigate this spaceship, how do we describe where these actors are located or where they are moving? We already established that Finnish rejects our tiny English prepositions like in or on.
Yes, and this brings us to what might be the true architectural marvel of the Finnish language, which is the noun cases.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and also, frankly, where people usually panic. Because if you search for Finnish grammar, the first thing that pops up to terrify you is that the language has 15 different noun cases.
It is intimidating, yes.
But we're not going to read a list of 15 abstract rules. For this learning guide, we're focusing on just 6 of them, the 6 locative cases.
Because approaching them as a random list to memorize is a guaranteed way to feel overwhelmed. Instead, try to visualize these 6 cases as a highly logical mathematical grid, a 3x2 matrix based entirely on spatial reality.
Okay, I'm visualizing the grid.
So the first axis of this grid is spatial position. Is the object located on the interior of something or on the surface of something?
Inside the box versus resting on top of the box. Simple enough.
Right. And the second axis deals with motion. Is the subject currently stationary? Are they approaching the location or are they departing from the location?
A 3x2 grid. Let's ground this with a concrete example from the source material so you, the listener, can actually hear the agglutination at work. Let's take the root word talo, which means house.
Perfect. So let's start with the interior row of our grid. If you are physically inside the house and you are stationary, you need the inessive case. You take the root talo and you glue on the suffix ssa talosa in a house.
Okay, so talosa is my stationary interior. But what if I decide to leave? I'm departing the interior.
Then you shift to the elative case. You swap that suffix for sta talosta out of a house.
And if I realize I forgot my keys and I need to walk back into the house, I'm approaching the interior.
That triggers the illative case. The rule here generally involves stretching the final vowel and adding an N. So talo becomes taloon, into a house.
Kolosa tolesta taloon. In, out of, into. That handles the inside. What about the second row of the grid, the surface level? Let's say I'm hanging out in the yard, stationary, on the property of the house.
That is the adessive case. The suffix is lla talola, at the house.
If I walk away from the yard, like departing the proximity, I swap the suffix.
Right. To the ablative case, use lta talolta from the house.
And walking back toward the yard, approaching the surface.
In the allative case, the suffix is lle talo, to the house.
I cannot emphasize enough how brilliant this feels. It's like snapping a highly specialized Lego brick onto a noun that acts as a built-in GPS tracker.
Yes.
You never need to fumble around for a separate word translating to, into, or from. The noun itself actually morphs its physical shape to tell you its exact trajectory in space and time.
And what's deeply fascinating here, and something that often gets overlooked, is the phonological pattern running underneath this grid. The sounds themselves carry subconscious meaning.
Wait, really? How so?
Look closely at the suffixes for being stationary. Tolosa for in and tolola for at. They both feature long, doubled consonants, the double S and the double L. That phonetic length actually grounds the word in the mouth. It literally sounds stationary and heavy.
Oh, wow. You linger on the sound just like you are lingering in the location.
Exactly. But then look at the suffixes for departing. Tolosta for out of and tolota for from. They both abruptly introduce a sharp T sound.
Oh, I see that.
In this specific locative system, that sharp T acts as a phonetic trigger expressing movement away from. It's not just a grammatical rule, it's an elegant, systematic matrix of motion baked right into the physical sounds of the syllables.
That shifts it from feeling like arbitrary memorization to feeling like acoustic engineering. It makes so much sense. So we've mapped out physical locations beautifully. We can get our gender-neutral pronouns in and out and around a house.
We can.
But physical geography is just one aspect of communication. How do these cases handle entirely abstract concepts? Because mapping a person walking into a room is one thing, but how does this system handle a concept like possession?
Well, this is a major stumbling block because to handle possession in Finnish, you have to completely rewire your English-speaking brain.
Uh-oh.
Finnish does not possess a verb for to have.
Let that sink in for a
Yeah.
second. An entire modern language with no direct verb for to have. So if I can't say I have, how on earth do I express that I own something? Say I have money.
You have to return to that spatial locative grid we just built. Specifically, you use the adhesive case, the stationary on the surface case, combined with our old friend, the verb to be, oya.
Okay.
So to express I have money, you construct the phrase Manula on Raha.
Menula on Rop. If we break that down, literally using the Lego bricks we just learned, Menu is me, Illa is on the surface of, on is, and Raha is money. Literally, on me is money.
Yes. Or to say the dog has a tail, you would literally construct on the dog as a tail.
That completely shifts the psychology of possession. If you physically cannot say I have and are forced to say on me is, ownership suddenly feels much more temporary.
It does.
It's almost passive, like the money or the object just happens to be resting on my surface right now.
It absolutely shifts the linguistic framework. You are moving away from a paradigm of I actively possess this object as a permanent extension of myself to a worldview that says this object currently exists in my immediate spatial proximity. The grammar treats the possessor merely as a location.
That is profound. And it perfectly sets up another quirk of the case system that linguists actually argue about, which the source material calls the accusative illusion.
Yes, the great debate.
We've seen how cases act as GPS trackers, but they also have to direct the grammatical traffic of a sentence, right?
They do. In grammatical terms, an accusative case is used to mark the direct object of a sentence. It flags the person or thing that is receiving the action. You need to know who is biting and who is being bitten. And for decades, traditional grammars taught that Finnish nouns had distinct accusative forms.
But the authoritative modern grammars push back on that completely.
They argue that it's largely an illusion. The modern authoritative grammar of Finnish maintains that only personal pronouns and the word kuka, meaning who, actually possess a true, dedicated accusative case ending in a T.
Okay.
So the word minute explicitly means me as an object receiving an action. But for regular, everyday nouns, there is no distinct object case.
Wait, if there is no distinct case to mark an object, how does the listener know the noun is receiving the action?
The noun borrows other forms. To act as an object, a Finnish noun will borrow its nominative form, which is just the raw, basic dictionary form of the word.
Right.
Or it will borrow its genitive form, which is typically used to show ownership, similar to adding an apostrophe S in English. The noun takes one of these existing forms and just wears it like a disguise in the object position of the sentence.
So the noun cases are doing massive double duty here. They are acting as physical spatial coordinates, but they are also directing the structural traffic for the grammar itself, determining subjects and objects by swapping these disguises. Exactly. And understanding that every single word is broadcasting its own exact role through its suffix, is the key to unlocking the ultimate superpower of Finnish grammar.
Which is free word order.
Yes. Think about how we do this in English. Word order is a rigid dictator of meaning. Subject, verb, object. The dog bit the man.
Right.
If you change the order of those exact same words to the man bit the dog, you haven't just changed the tone, you've created a completely different, much more newsworthy event. Position is everything.
Because English words generally don't carry their roles internally.
Exactly. English sentences are like a fiercely strict seating chart at a wedding. If the guests sit in the wrong chairs, the whole event descends into chaos. You don't know who is related to the bride and who is related to the groom just by looking at them standing in a vacuum. You only understand their relationship to the event by where they are sitting at the table.
That's a fantastic visualization.
But Finnish words are like wedding guests, wearing highly specific, brightly colored name tags. Those are the glued-on cases we've been talking about. The tag explicitly details exactly how they know the couple. Because of that, the guests can mingle anywhere in the room, stand in any corner, group up however they want, and everyone still knows exactly who they are and what they are doing.
Right, because the suffix dictates the role, not the position. Now, the standard neutral order in Finnish is still subject, verb, object, just like English.
Sure.
If you say koia puri miste, you are saying the dog bit the man. It's a bald, neutral statement of fact. But because the word for man, misti, is case-marked as the object receiving the bite, you can rearrange those three words to change the emphasis of the sentence without changing the core factual meaning.
So if I rearrange the Lego blocks and say miste puri koira, moving the man to the front of the sentence, I'm emphasizing the victim. The translation shifts closer to the man was bitten by a dog.
Yes. And if you move the subject to the front in a different way, say, koira miste puri, you are emphatically confirming that it was indeed a dog that bit him, defending against the accusation that it was a snake or a bear.
Oh, wow.
You naturally place whatever piece of information you want to highlight at the absolute front of the sentence.
Let's apply this flexibility back to our possession example. Minula on raha. On me is money. If I move the money to the front, raha minula on.
By fronting the money, you translate roughly to money something I do have. The heavy implication there is that you might be lacking something else, like time or perhaps common sense.
That is hilarious. And if I move the verb to the front, on minula raha.
That immediately becomes defensive. Yes, I do have money, usually said in response to someone actively doubting your financial status.
This highlights an incredible, almost cinematic capability of the language. In English, we have to rely so heavily on our tone of voice, italicizing words in our speech, or adding extra descriptive filler words to express sarcasm, defensiveness, or hyperfocus.
You do.
In Finnish, you don't necessarily need vocal inflection, you just rearrange the structural blocks. The emotional and contextual weight of a sentence is literally built into its architecture.
It allows for a staggering amount of nuance to be conveyed purely through syntax. It's a level of precision that English struggles to match without adding a lot of verbal clutter.
So what does this all mean for us navigating this spaceship? If you started this deep dive thinking Finnish was just a nightmare of 15 noun cases designed by linguists to torture students, well, we hope this structural tour has shifted that perspective.
It really isn't a chaotic jumble of rules. It is an intensely logical, wholly self-contained system.
Pronouns gracefully fade into the verbs. Nouns swallow up prepositions to become their own map coordinates in space. And as a reward for mastering that density, the rigid sentence structure you grew up with is set completely free. You can paint with the words however you want, putting the most important colors at the front of the canvas. Thank you to you, the listener, for coming on this deep dive with us and mastering these foundations. You've got the blueprints to the spaceship now, and you know how the engine works.
But before we officially wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought regarding something we touched on in the middle of our guide. We explored how Finnish rejects the active verb to have, replacing it with the spatial, locative concept of on me is.
Yeah, that blew my mind.
Think about how deeply our native language shapes our worldview from the moment we start speaking. If the language you grew up speaking, the language of your ancestors, the language you use to structure your internal thoughts, lacks a direct, active verb for ownership, how might that fundamentally alter a society's psychological relationship with property, with materialism, and with the natural world over centuries of development?
Wow, if I am just a location for things to exist near, that changes everything. Something to chew on until the next deep dive.